Hi everyone, I'm Mark. Now I'm making this video in the interest of public safety as I feel I have a moral and ethical obligation as a social worker to ensure that the community are aware of my experience with some extremely dangerous bullies, some of which hold incredibly dangerous positions of power. Now this all relates to my experience with bullying in the form of gaslighting and other severe and more direct forms of psychological abuse, so severe that it has the potential to cost lives, where I was literally tormented and abused throughout the greatest crisis of my life and final 6 months of my degree, until the closest people in my life were dead, just to have those deaths used as weapons against me by Latino Grooves staff at Latino Grooves events, which has had severe impacts on all aspects of my life, leaving me with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and complicated grief syndrome, which has been aggravated over the years by ongoing bullying perpetrated by Latino Grooves staff. Now, after years of torment and abuse, it has only been through recent attempts of confronting Latino Grooves in full face of the public that I have finally received a response from Latino Grooves providing confirmation of and clearing away any confusion as to the malicious intent behind the gaslighting and psychological abuse I experienced in a cruel and cowardly attempt to isolate me and kick me over and over again whilst I was at my most vulnerable, in a very calculated and deliberate attempt to inflict as much damage as possible across all aspects of my life in a manner that can be considered on par with attempted murder. And the gang mentality by which Latino Grooves went about this falls well within the parameters of conspiracy to murder. As the instigator and perpetrator of the worst of the abuse I experienced via Latino Grooves was an ex-sexual partner of mine and former staff member of Latino Grooves, Rosie or Rosalie Bourne, who is a social worker and is the most dangerous woman I have ever met, to the point I have good reason to believe she may be a psychopath. I will be strongly advising the Australian Association of Social Workers, along with any human service organisation who has employed her over the past 7 years, to carefully examine my experience with Rosie in understanding the insidious ways by which she operates and how potentially dangerous she is, and doing whatever is in their power to ensure that every decision she has made throughout her career be reviewed in the interests of public safety, particularly in relation to any allegations of misconduct that may have been made towards Rosie by either clients or other employees. Due to having never inquired as to Rosie's whereabouts or other aspects of her life, I am unaware of the majority of organisations to which this may apply. However, I am aware that she did undertake roles in child protection at organisations such as Families SA up until moving from Adelaide to Melbourne around 5 years ago. Now, due to the fact that child protection is an incredibly important role involving huge decisions with the potential to have major impacts on many lives, not only in the sense of potential impacts upon the families involved, including the parents and the trajectories and disadvantage faced by any children removed, but also a huge range of potential impacts associated with this, with broader impacts on society as a whole. And considering my experience with Rosie Bourne's lack of ethics and sense of morality, her vindictive nature and the insidious ways by which she operates, I have grave concerns for Rosie's potential to make extremely unethical decisions in violation of human rights and social justice in cases where she may have been rubbed up the wrong way and has the power of the pen. In light of this, once again, I strongly urge Families SA and other organisations to carefully examine my experience with the ways in which she operates in ensuring that any instances where human rights and social justice may have been violated are not left unaddressed. In in introducing a number of potential witnesses as to the ways in which Rosie Bourne plays people off against one another whilst presenting herself as a victim and manipulating people in order to get what she wants before their discard. I have strong reason to believe that she did not pass her first student placement as a social worker in 2011, which occurred in the months leading up to the severe gaslighting and psychological abuse she inflicted upon me. Due to the fact she laid what I believe were false bully allegations against the entire organisation, which she dropped as soon as her placement was signed off. Now, I provided Rosie with a great deal of support throughout these bully allegations, to the point that I actually approached Patricia Muncie, who at the time was the head of the School of Social Work at UniSA. Now, when I approached Patricia, I did so in a manner that acknowledged and respected that due to confidentiality, she was limited to the extent with which she could discuss an issue that related to another student's affairs. However, she was able to give me some support and guidance more in relation to the challenges that I was personally experiencing in attempting to provide support around these allegations. Now, putting these allegations into context, Rosie's story is that she was being bullied by all members of the organisation, including the manager and entire staff body, with the exception of her supervisor, which Rosie claimed was due to her being better than everyone else at everything, to which the main example I recall her providing was to do with her rearranging the entire file system of the organisation, which I have no doubt may have upset a few people. Now, I believe what really happened is that the manager and other staff within the organisation were in a greater position to see straight through Rosie. However, Rosie was more readily able to manipulate her supervisor due to the fact that she was located in a separate part of the organisation and therefore removed from the situation. And leading up to the end of Rosie's student placement, her supervisor resigned from a full-time permanent position and joined arms with the University of South Australia's School of Social Work in proceeding with bully allegations against the entire organisation. However, as soon as Rosie was signed off as having passed her student placement, she then turned around and dropped all of these allegations. Throughout the time I supported Rosie in these allegations, I developed a great deal of respect for her supervisor and in the integrity she demonstrated through essentially sacrificing her career in standing up for what she believed was right. And myself urged Rosie to stand up and have some integrity when she turned around and dropped the allegations. Also strongly encouraged Rosie to maintain the relationship with her supervisor, and was absolutely disgusted in the fact that Rosie put in no effort to maintain contact with a woman who had sacrificed so much for her. However, as it turns out, this woman had served her purpose and was no longer any use to Rosie. Now, looking back, I feel like an absolute fool that I was unable to see straight through this and how well it fits with Rosie Bourne's consistent pattern of playing the victim throughout life. Now, I'd be very interested to hear the perspective of those caught up in Rosie's bully allegations on my experience with her, and quite frankly could use the support. Now, another potential witness from the University of South Australia was one of my complexity and practice tutors in 2011, Cecile Dutrix, who Rosie was very well aware that I was planning on approaching as a potential career mentor. Now, I have strong reason to believe that Rosie sabotaged this relationship, which will be discussed in further detail throughout the timeline of the gaslighting and psychological abuse I experienced at the hands of Rosie Bourne and the rest of her flying monkeys at Latino Grooves at the time specified below. Now, as this is an absolutely huge case with more ethical issues than I can even begin to comprehend, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask the University of South Australia and the Australian Association of Social Workers in assisting to come up with an ethical approach to this matter. Now, I expect that the South Australian body of the Australian Association of Social Workers is likely the most appropriate centre point from which to investigate this case. However, I'm willing to go completely transparent with both organisations in regards to my entire academic record including referees throughout both of my student placements, as well as an extensive list of highly reputable professionals who hold positions from which they will be able to provide confirmation of the consistent character I have demonstrated throughout the past 15 years. Now, after years of pain and confusion, it has only been through coming to the point that I realise I will never heal unless I stand up for myself, and through the recent series of attempting to raise my complaints against Latino Grooves in full face of the public, that I have, for the first time, confirmation from Latino Grooves as to the calculated and malicious attempts to destroy all aspects of my life, including my reputation both socially and in relation to my career. Such confirmation came when Hugo Salcido, the founder and manager of Latino Grooves, put a post out to his 17,000 followers claiming that it's all lies that I've made up to hurt them, which doesn't make any sense, that I'm the obsessed ex, whilst blatantly lying himself and pretending the worst of the abuse occurred 10 years ago, when in actual fact everyone knows it was 7, and completely neglecting the ongoing abuse that I have experienced over the years since, claiming that I'm crazy and making it all up to hurt them. Initially tagging me in this post, however deleting me when I'd only had the opportunity to respond to 2 comments, in order for Latino Grooves to control and manipulate the narrative, which is a blatant attempt of triangulation on a mass scale. For those who aren't familiar, triangulation is a tactic of narcissistic abuse, which I will discuss in detail in attempting to thoroughly articulate my experience with these dangerous bullies. However, in addition to providing an extremely dishonest and manipulative response and then cutting me out of the conversation, when I added comments relating to this onto my review on their company, Latino Grooves appear to have since responded to this by completely removing their reviews section. Now, Hugo Salcido is an incredibly dangerous man who holds large social events in the form of Latin dance events at venues such as the Aqaba Hotel, who is a known bully amongst the Latin dance community, who has over the last 15 years attempted to, and in most cases succeeded, in bullying everyone who has made reservations to host Latin dance events at the Aqaba Hotel into cancelling their reservation. Now, in my understanding, such conduct is illegal under freedom of trade legislation. I make no apologies over the fact that I am speaking to second-hand information due to the fact that over the past 15 years I have consistently heard the same story over and over again by completely unrelated sources, that I've absolutely no question about the truth behind this. In addition to and further supporting this, according to the last person that I'm aware of who has been bullied into cancelling their reservations, the Aqaba Hotel is very well aware of Hugo's conduct surrounding this, however has not been in a position where they're able to do anything about it. Personally, I feel that the Aqaba Hotel and those who have had this experience owe it to the community to come forward in the interests of public safety. In addition to this, over the past 6 months, Hugo Salcido has also attempted to incite violence on 2 separate occasions between 2 separate sets of people within the dance community. Now, I was one of those people after Hugo bullied me into removing my first review. I reluctantly met with him for a coffee, encouraged me to retaliate with violence against one of his staff members after I described a particular instance of bullying which occurred 7 years ago. Now, the other occasion of Hugo inciting violence involved a member of a rival school who approached Hugo for advice in relation to conflict with a teacher in yet another competing school, and was advised by Hugo to bash and have this other member of the community kicked out of the country, which, had his manipulation been successful, would have seen Hugo effectively hit 2 birds with 1 stone without so much as getting his hands dirty. Now, this is absolutely unacceptable behaviour from anyone hosting social events of any magnitude. Now, I'm quite concerned that despite a lot of these instances being public knowledge, that the Latin community is continuing to support Latino Grooves. Now, quite frankly, I find myself very concerned that despite a lot of what I've said being common knowledge, particularly amongst the longer term dancers, that the majority of the Latin dance community appear to condone Hugo Salcido's insidious mentality, as demonstrated by the ongoing support for his company.